What I'm about to show you will change human history. I have made discoveries that empirically reveal there was a high intelligence society at the end of the last ice age and before. In this video, I will show you how at Gobekli Tepe, they were using the sun, daytime constellations, and the Milky Way galaxy to communicate and teach the cycles of human consciousness and the rebuilding of civilization. The impact of these findings touches everything and everyone on this planet. But most powerful is the story that they were communicating then and what it reveals about our lives right now. I encourage you to watch the whole video because at the end, I show you the magic of their understanding. Our reality is about to change. So this is our Yuga cycle. We've talked about it. What I did was I added the Milky Way on the outside, just roughly so you could get an understanding. And I added Ophiuchus and Orion. And these are our main human archetypes. This is the hunter and the healer. And it's really the guides that are the landmarks on this journey that I'm telling you about with the cube and bringing coherence to yourself, bringing awakening to the species, and this idea of supernatural selection. So we have these two archetypes, and we decided to put them at polar opposite points in the sky. We have Ophiuchus on one side and Orion on the other. Ophiuchus is at the point where we come into alignment with the sun and the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And as I showed you in the first video on Gobekli Tepe, it's when we come into alignment with Satya Yuga, and that's the heightened age of humanity. And as we see Ophiuchus there, we understand that this is the golden gate of esoteric traditions. This is where the souls rise to meet the higher awakening and awareness. And that's the idea of higher consciousness. Opposite of Ophiuchus in the sky, when Ophiuchus is rising or setting, Orion is rising or setting, and that's what we put right underneath the point where the sun comes in contact with the Milky Way galaxy, looking furthest away from the center point. So what we have here, this would be the silver gate, or the gate of darkness, right? And this is the idea of when we come into the Kali Yuga, we are facing this, and you could see that with Orion right there on the map. Well, what I've done here is I have overlaid Gobekli Tepe, a map for Gobekli Tepe, and I have oriented it to the stars that would be in the night sky at the time and in the direction that it is facing. So when you stand with these two pillars, when you were standing right in the center of the circle, you would be looking south-southeast because of the way the stones are oriented with their hands. And then behind you, north-northwest, you would have Ophiuchus. And then Orion would be rising in front of you. So Ophiuchus would be setting and Orion would be rising. Now already we can see how this is extremely interesting, because where those stones are oriented on the left-hand side stone, this top stone, that is right where we would be going into a fall in the heightened age. If you could see, it's when the beginning of the descent. And then the rising is where pillar 31 would be, right as Pisces comes around. And what is extremely interesting about all of this is how it perfectly aligns with Ophiuchus and Orion. So now, what I want to do is jump off of where we were with Gobekli Tepe. So I showed you how the symbols on Gobekli Tepe, pillar 43, were aligned to the center of the Milky Way galaxy and the rising of the Satya Yuga. So now what I'm going to do is let's look at the Gobekli Tepe site from the context of what it would look like in the night sky at the time, or the daytime sky. So if we orient ourselves north by northwest, south by southeast, what we would do is we would be right at the point of the autumnal equinox. So the reason that they would be worshiping or ritualizing this time is because they would be moving from the height into the darkness. So they would be using the seasons as the marker for that. And the autumn or the fall is when we would move into darkness. So it's the autumnal equinox, and It is the sunset of the autumnal equinox. And I'm going to prove that to you right now. So we're going to go to the autumnal equinox sunset. And we're going to see that when we put Gobekli Tepe, see how it is just north or just west of northwest right here if we're situating it. So pillar 43 is right about here. Well, as we play this, what you're going to see is Virgo is coming down and it lands right on the sign. Then you will see Libra, and then you'll see Scorpio, and then you see Sagittarius. And what's really interesting that I want to point out to you here, these are daytime constellations. They were marking daytime constellations on pillar 43 and saying that this is a time in the past. How do I know this? Well, because this is actually, Gobekli Tepe, this enclosure D, is an initiatory tool. They would be walking through this site, initiating people into this wisdom. And we see this throughout time. We see this in our mystery traditions with Eleusinian mysteries. We see this in the Egyptian mysteries. We see this in mystery schools and the Illuminati, Osiris, Set, the ideas of these passings of the great cycles in time. Ultimately, Mithra and Christ. These are the ways that we were teaching ourselves to remember this heightened age because we knew we were going into a fall. And how do I know that? Well, as we look at Gobekli Tepe and its alignments, we realize that these sites and these pillars, these station stones all the way around are marking daytime constellations. Now, we're supposed to believe that this is a hunter-gatherer society. We have no real story in our history for a site like this. But we live in a very heightened society right now, very high intelligence by what we understand. And I can tell you the majority of people on this planet don't know, one, what the constellations are at night, but two, what the constellations are during the day. And we have food and we have friends and we have protection to where we could actually explore these things. We're meant to believe that these are peoples that don't have food. They got to go find their food. They got to go figure how they're going to get their calories and everything. And they are barely able to comprehend their own daylight, much less the stars that are going on at night and the stars that are going on during the day. But this demonstrates clearly that they had this awareness and this intelligence, and they were marking it and they were using it for some sort of practice. And that practice was to remember the cycle of consciousness and remember that there would be a time it would darken. Because if we can remember this and we can educate ourselves through, we can move through and develop the species so that we can come back online and move and spiritually evolve back to the healer, which is what all of my work is and what I'm telling you. So now, how can I prove that to you? That's what I'm going to do now. There's a little marker stone at Gobekli Tepe that faces north-northwest. And I believe what they needed to do, or what they were using that stone for, is it was marking Deneb. People have talked about this. It was marking Cygnus. But what it would do is we follow Cygnus coming down. We see that Deneb falls right in the center point of north-northwest where this was facing, where this pointer stone is. And they would see that. And right when it hits that, the fall equinox would happen. The autumnal equinox would rise. The sun would rise. So they would know when to begin the story. And because this is Cygnus flying along the Milky Way, they would be telling their people group to get on the bird of the Milky Way, jump on the back, and we're going to travel around in the light so that we can inform you what to do during the darkness. Because as we follow this sign all the way, or this path all the way around, we follow these markers all the way around, we get on the bird, and then the day starts, and they would walk around, they would hit each stone, they would talk about it, and it would talk about, this fox, which is really a jackal because it's tied to Set and the story of this awakening. But this jackal would arise, and the snake, and this is the reptilian aspects. The reptilian aspects would be rising at this time, and the genetics would be coming online, and we would be darkening, and we would have to remember this. So they would be telling the story of how to do this, and they would follow through through all day till finally they would get to pillar 43. And as they come around this day, they run in right about the time of Kali Yuga. They would run into birds. So it would go from a dog to talking about sheep and a donkey and domestication. And so that's shepherding and domestication. We talk about this in the myths and the involution and evolution cycle. So they're teaching us the patterns of the myths, but they would come in and then birds would start, coming online on the stones. And that's the idea of Horus. And we would beginning to put together, we would have higher awareness and Thoth, thought, Thoth, Thoth would be coming online. We would get higher wisdom again in Aquarius, and we would be coming back online, ultimately coming back to the pillar 43 at the sunset of that day. At that time, we would see Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius hitting that stone, and we would see Orion rising on the back of Cygnus because we just took that journey, and we would rise into the domesticated nature, that dog of the jackal and the reptilian aspects of our genetics, that lower awareness. We would move into transformation of Scorpio, and then Sagittarius, Libra, and Virgo, and it would be marking the next portion of that cycle. And then they would come into darkness and they would enter the center of that circle, and they would be facing Orion. Ophiuchus would be at their back, and they would have on their left Ursa Major rising, and it's characterized by this left pillar and the jackal that's on it. Now they have that story in their arms. In their minds, their left brain has that story, and they're facing the hunter rising, mankind in darkness, and going and telling this story, going out and building civilization again, because that's what I believe this site did. And it's one of probably many that we'll discover when this information starts to get distributed, is that these are the stories that we are attempting to remember and demonstrate that we were telling ourselves this. We stored it in the stars because we knew we would lose it. And we also wanted to demonstrate the power of consciousness, that it was inherent in creation. It is the top-down creative force of existence. And as we explored the bottom up through stories like the breaking apart of Osiris with Set, as you walk around these and you start to understand the myths as they develop with shepherding and domestication, as we explore the involution and evolutionary cycle, and we explore how our myths connect to each other and are scaffolding our awareness, you realize that we came to a point at Pisces where we were introduced to a story where the king and the kingdom are not of this world, they're of another one, and it's the healer. And it's where we are meant to turn around, and where they were walking from Ophiuchus to Orion, we are meant to turn around and walk from Orion to Ophiuchus and journey back, gaining this wisdom and moving from the Hierophant to the healer. I will unpack this and dig much deeper in the time to come, and we'll unravel all of this, because I have mapped it with the cube, and I've mapped it with the involution and evolutionary process. I've demonstrated how all of these things are connected. I've demonstrated how we've known this, and how through the Renaissance and the scientific method, we remembered this information and we passed it on. How Leonardo da Vinci locked it in so that we would remind ourselves of the myth of Mithra and the story drawing us back to Ophiuchus, because Mithra is Ophiuchus, and sacrificing the bull of the sun god, challenging ourselves to face those things that we hold so sacred, but that are keeping us stuck, so that we can move into true awareness, true alignment, and true consciousness, and live in this reality free and reclaim ourself as one with all. And that is the healer's journey. Because when you imagine yourself in between those two pillars, and you see the imagery of Ophiuchus behind you and these two pillars beside you, and then Set and Osiris next to Ramses, and then also Christ in between the two thieves, you see that this is the story we've been attempting to pass on, so that when you remember, you move through that sacrifice and you reclaim your position and your place at that Last Supper. You are back in that higher room, and you have united the kingdom like Odysseus, and you can reclaim the kingdom. And so I hope you will continue to watch. I hope you will share. I hope you will like. I hope you will follow. I hope you will go to my other channels. I hope you will engage. I hope you will tell everyone about this, because I promise you, this is massive. It has major implications, and I have just tied it back and showed you things that nobody has seen. I've showed you Mithra, Last Supper, but I've also showed you how our most ancient of spiritual sites is directly connected. And what I want to show you here before we leave is I want to bring you back to that site. I want you to stand in between those two pillars. And I want you to recognize that as you're looking at Ophiuchus and you're looking at Orion, you are actually walking on the Milky Way. Because as you are in that path and in that orientation, the Milky Way is passing both over the top of you and right underneath you. And so this is a magical revelation. I can't wait to share more. Thank you so much. And let everyone know.